Hey, welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is Underworld Kings, the rise and fall from Light Not Studios. You know, living in New York, you get used to the sounds of the city. Sirens, construction, the subway rumbling beneath your feet. But imagine, for a second, a different sound echoing off these same brick and steel canyons. Not a car horn, but the sharp, percussive blast of a dynamite bomb. Not a shouted argument, but a letter slipped under your shop door with a simple, terrifying demand: pay up or we'll blow you and your family to pieces. That wasn't just imagination for an entire generation of immigrants here. That was their reality, and it had a name: the Black Hand. This is the story of La Mano Nera, not a single organized syndicate, but a terrifying brand of crime, a method of terror that preyed upon the hopes and fears of the Italian immigrant community in early 1900s America. These were the bomb-throwing extortionists who turned neighborhoods into war zones and whose reign of fear gave birth to the modern American Mafia. This is Episode 3, The Black Hand Terror. To understand the Black Hand, you have to understand the landscape. Between 1880 and 1920, nearly 4 million Italians arrived in America. They came for work, for a better life, cramming into tenements in places like East Harlem, Brooklyn, and Chicago's Little Italy. They were hardworking, often distrustful of the distant Italian government, and deeply suspicious of American police. They kept to themselves, and into this perfect, vulnerable ecosystem, the predators slithered. The modus operandi was brutally simple. A businessman, a grocer, a banker, a fruit importer would receive a letter. It was often decorated with crude drawings, a knife, a skull, a coffin, and of course, the inky imprint of a black hand. The message was direct. You have $2,000. Place it in a bag and wait for our messenger. If you report this to the police, we will dynamite your home and your business. We know where your children go to school. It was signed, La Mano Nera. The sheer psychological terror of that note is hard to overstate. It wasn't just a threat from a stranger. It was a declaration that they knew you, they'd been watching your family, they knew the value of your life's work down to the dollar, and they were willing to burn it all down. Most victims paid. They scraped together the money, terrified into silence. But some refused, and that's when the bombs started to fly. We're not talking about metaphorical bombs. We're talking about actual sticks of dynamite, wrapped in wire, with a burning fuse, hurled onto a front stoop or through a store window. The goal wasn't always to kill, though that happened. It was to demonstrate absolute, ruthless power. To make an example, in one infamous case in New York, a baker named Benedetto Madonia was sent a Black Hand letter. He went to the police. The very next day, his shop was obliterated by a blast so powerful it shattered windows down the block. The message was received, loud and clear. What's fascinating and so sinister is that the Black Hand wasn't a corporation with a boss and a flowchart. It was a franchise of fear. Any small-time thug, any opportunistic gangster could adopt the brand. They'd scribble the symbol, make the threat, and collect. It was decentralized terror. This made it incredibly resilient and almost impossible for law enforcement to eradicate. You could arrest one bomber, but the symbol, the idea, lived on. It was a virus, and the police were utterly outmatched. They didn't speak the language. They couldn't penetrate the wall of omerta, the code of silence, and they often viewed the immigrants with disdain, seeing the bombings as a problem contained within the immigrant quarter. The community was trapped between the criminals and a police force that didn't protect them. This, right here, is the crucial pivot point in American organized crime history. The chaos of the Black Hand era created a market for a new kind of criminal, a businessman of crime, someone who could impose order on the chaos, not with more random bombs, but with system, with structure, and with a chilling, long-term vision. The young Sicilian and Neapolitan gangsters watching this unfold saw the flaw in the Black Hand model. Extortion is a one-time transaction. It burns your victim out, it attracts way too much heat, and it's unsustainable. They imagined something else, not just extortion, but ongoing partnerships. Protection rackets, a regular tax on business, in exchange for not being bombed by anyone else, including them. They would become the police, the judge, and the executioner for a community that trusted no one else. Men like Giuseppe Joe the Boss, Masuria, and later Salvatore Maranzano and Lucky Luciano began their rise in this world. They started as Black Handers, but they evolved. They consolidated power. They understood that to survive and profit, you needed to control the territory, not just terrorize one shop at a time. The Black Hand was the violent, messy adolescence of the American Mafia. The 5 families that would eventually emerge were its cold, calculating adulthood. I think about this a lot, as someone who built a life far from where I started in Bangladesh. The immigrant experience is fundamentally about building something new, about creating safety and opportunity out of chaos. The profound tragedy of the Black Hand story is that it weaponized that very desire. It targeted the self-made, the successful, the ones who had actually achieved the dream. It said, your hard work doesn't make you safe, it makes you a target. That betrayal, from within your own community, cuts deeper than any prejudice from outside. The reign of the Black Hand didn't end with a massive police raid. It faded, was absorbed, and was made obsolete by the very monsters it created. As the more organized syndicates took power, they actively suppressed the freelance bomb throwers. Random terrorism was bad for business. It brought federal attention. The old, crude Mano Nera notes gave way to quiet conversations and understandings. The bombs became less frequent, replaced by a more insidious, permanent form of control. So, what's the legacy of the Black Hand terror? It's more than just a historical crime wave. It was the brutal pressure cooker that forged modern organized crime in America. It showed how fear can paralyze a community, and how that vacuum of power will always be filled. It's a stark lesson in what happens when people feel abandoned by the institutions meant to protect them. They will find protection elsewhere, even if it comes from the devil himself. Thanks for listening to this episode of Underworld Kings. If these stories of power, fear, and the shadows of history resonate with you, please follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Sharing it with a friend is the best way you can support us. This is Ibnul J. Farabi, reminding you that all light does is cast a shadow. For more from Light Knot Studios, visit lightknotstudios.com.